Okay,
And the live stream is up, everybody.
Thank you, Carrie. Okay, Tom's coming in. Everybody ready? We got everybody? Yes?
Thank you, Wendy.
You're welcome. This is the public session of the Holmdel Township Committee meeting scheduled for April 13th, 2021 at 7:30 p.m. This meeting is being conducted on a remote electronic basis using Zoom with live streaming on Facebook and YouTube. In accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4-10, and the regulations governing remote meetings, NJAC 5:39-1.5, I hereby announce that adequate notice and electronic notice of this meeting was provided in a notice dated January 6, 2021, that was sent to the Asbury Park Press, the Two River Times, posted on the bulletin board and on the main access door of Township Hall, filed in the clerk's office, and posted on the township's website, www.holmdeltownship.com. Please be advised that the agenda for tonight's meeting is also available for download on the township website. Members of the public wishing to provide comment at the designated times may do so over the Zoom platform by clicking the raise hand button or dialing *9 if accessing this meeting by telephone. Public commenters are asked to provide their name and address prior to comment and shall be limited to 3 minutes. Public comments may not include disruptive conduct such as profanity. Public commenters are reminded that this meeting is being live streamed over the internet, which will be archived in the Township YouTube and Facebook pages, and that recordings of the public meeting are public records subject to Open Public Records Act. Mayor Bontempo?
Here.
Ms. Weber?
Here.
Mr. Critelli?
Here.
Mr. Lucarelli?
Here.
Mr. Santana?
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Wendy. Everyone, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Everyone, please stand, remain standing for a moment of silence to honor our troops and military, both home and abroad, who work tirelessly to protect us each and every day. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining Holmdel Township Committee meeting on April 13, 2021. We have a pretty packed agenda. I think to help the flow of things, because we are going to do the introduction of our 2021 budget. I'd like to bring that to the front end of the meeting, have Sharon and Bill do your presentation now, because before I open for public comment, or if there's any public questions on the agenda, it may help if they see what you're presenting tonight first.
Happy to. Thank you, Mayor. Just give me a second to share my screen. This. Bear with me. Okay, share screen. There we go. Okay, can everyone see?
Got it, Sean.
Oh, no. Good. Up on my end. Okay. So this is our proposed administrative budget. What I will say is, forgive me, when we started working on this budget, it was snowy after a beautiful day like today. I'm sorry, this is the picture that I used, but it is a great shot and it was taken by one of our staff members. So Holmdel looks beautiful even in the snow. A quick note before we dive into the meat and potatoes. There was a mix-up on page 5 of what was printed in the narrative and also posted on Friday. Instead of 2021 final net valuation, it should have said preliminary net valuation. We have since gotten the final net valuation, which is that $4.3 billion number. And because of that, we have now changed the anticipated surplus on sheet 4 in terms of revenue to 3.6 million. And on sheet 11, item number 6, the amount to be raised by taxes to $14,848,687.27. So just want to note, what I will say is that we will update all of these documents. They will be noted that they are a revised document, and post those. So everyone will have those updates. As we move forward, just so everyone knows, some key budget dates. Today, we're doing the budget introduction. As I said, we will post the revised actual budget, the revised narrative, and this presentation. They will all be available on our website under the Finance Department tab. Tonight, there is no public comment on the budget specifically. We will advertise it. It goes in on April 23rd, and we will have a public hearing on May 11th, and hopefully an adoption on that date too. So we will have a time to specifically talk about the budget on May 11th. Bill, as I go through this, feel free to jump in if I'm missing anything or forgetting anything, and I'm going to throw some of the things to you anyway.
Okay.
So just a general overview to remind people, and some people, if you heard me do this last year, there will be some refreshers and some new information here. But what is the municipal budget? It really serves two purposes. First purpose, it is a funding tool for our operations for the year. Second, it is the very first step to laying out a capital plan for maintenance, for infrastructure improvements for the year. So those are the two aspects that are part of this budget. As we go through, I'm going to talk a little bit about those operations, and then we'll talk about the capital. The budget does include both discretionary spending and spending that we're committed to, but I do want to note that even our discretionary spending isn't very discretionary. That includes things like office supplies, building repairs, vehicle repairs. So there's not like we have a lot of wiggle room in there. Even so, about 5% of the budget is that discretionary spending. I also want to note, it's really, really important, according to state statute, this budget has to be followed. We don't have the option of midway through the year willy-nilly changing it. We can't spend any more than what's already budgeted in the line item. There are a couple of exceptions. After November 1st, we can do transfers. They have to be approved by the township committee from one line item to another. We can make amendments for, let's say, if we get grants or if we bring in a new shared service, we can make an amendment. Again, it has to be approved by the governing body. And those amendments, if we're changing any total amounts, it also has to go through the state. Appropriation challenges 2021. 2020 was a challenging year, and 2021 seems to still be a challenging year. Of course, we have the ongoing pandemic, and there are costs associated with this pandemic. And unlike last year, the CARES Act money no longer exists for us. So that's something that we've had to consider. And it's everything from PPE, from additional cleaning supplies to additional staffing. So that was a challenge that we've had. The severe weather. We were blessed for a number of years in New Jersey to have some very mild winters. And this year, I think they made up for all of it. We had 8 weather events. Some of them lasted multiple days. We had over 33 inches of snow. So that costs a lot of money in terms of overtime, in terms of salt. That was a challenge that we had this year. Bill, I think you're going to go over some of the other increases that we saw this year.
Yes, we also have our debt service. Our debt service, as you know, 2 years ago, we had some permanent financing, and that's set in stone. We do have to pay that. That increase is nearly 7% this year, $220,000. The next pensions increasing 12% or $250,000. One of the issues with that, as a lot of people know, as you read in the paper, there's issues with the state pension fund. They were using some very unrealistic numbers for anticipating the revenues up at 8% plus, when it's not earning 8% plus out there. like to know where you are if you are making that kind of interest. So they've lowered those rates a little bit lower, and I don't think that's the end of it. I'm sure we'll see some increase the next couple of years after this also. Social Securities, that's going up for a couple reasons. As a pool, we moved people from the pool into the regular budget. As you know, pool's did not run at capacity in 2020, and we're not anticipating the full-time staff being charged to the pool budget in 2021. And also some of the shared services, we do have to pay Social Security, even though we're having revenue for it that's covering it, that has to go under the Social Security line item in the budget. And of course, our health share premiums are going up 9%, which is $158,000, which is substantially less than the original amount that we got from the Horizon on our own. We went over to the state health benefits plan effective April 1st. So that's saving us a substantial sum of money. That would have gone up substantially more if we had not switched over.
Those are some of the challenges. There are some things that I just wanted to point out in this budget. In terms of appropriations, this recommends continuing to provide $65,000 to the first aid squad. We had increased the amount that we contributed to them last year, largely due to some of the costs associated with the pandemic response. It is not over, so recommending keeping that same number. It actually also recommends an increase to the fire department. There are some different nuances and some issues that the fire department is dealing with. The proposal includes a part-time employee for our IT department, which came up at our workshop meeting. We currently have one person in our IT department, and I want to wrap him in bubble wrap and make sure nothing ever happens. So an IT is just, he needs support. We're a large town, there's a lot of work, and also just to have a backup. Some might note that the operating expenses for IT have gone up. That's largely due to a lot of our maintenance agreements, which used to be in various department accounts, are now included in that. So if you notice a jump there, that's what that is about. We also have separated out the expenses for the Planning and Zoning Board. It's just a better reflects what each of those boards do. So you'll see a difference between last year on that. An item of note, this probably should have been on the challenges slide, but the increase in the minimum wage has increased costs associated with a lot of our seasonal employees. We employ 70 people in the summertime that are part-time, and that minimum wage has gone up. We did try to reduce appropriations whenever we could. We made little cuts here and there to try to offset some of these things that were beyond our control, which is how we got to the budget that we have presented. This is just an overview for everyone to visually see. This is a breakdown of expenses. As you can see, the largest portion is salaries and wages. Operating is 28%, and you can see the other breakdown. Again, this will all be posted. I'm going to ask Bill to go over the appropriations cap. I know we talked about this last year, but it's always worth refreshing for everyone.
Again, we have the appropriations cap that limit the amount of operations that a town can increase their budget by. That is, this year is actually at 1%. The max we can go is 3.5% by ordinance. We do have an ordinance that we're going to introduce later in the meeting to increase it from the statutory 1% this year up to 3.5%. That'll give us a maximum allowable of $21,075,000. Our budget's only at $20,295,000, leaving us a bank available of $778,000. The reason we want this is because certain items are within the caps. For example, our pension increases. Pensions in the caps. So if the pension goes up and if we don't have the money in the caps, we have to cut somewhere. And also health insurance. Health insurance is also in the caps. So those two items alone is the incentive that just to bank it. Now, we haven't used that much bank, we do have a lot in there. So it's smart to do, and it could be needed in the future.
Now on the revenue side, what we're bringing in, we've had some challenges there too. As we've already mentioned, swim club. We are anticipating fewer revenues in the swim club than we did in 2019. In 2019, we realized over $100,000 in swim club revenue. It was a great year. Our staff did a really great job in 2019. And then boom, the pandemic hit. So last year we brought in less than 150,000. I do have some good news on this front. So far in 2021, we are at over 200,000, which is about $40,000 more than where we were at this point in 2019. So there might be some light, and I'm hoping that our estimate for the swim club is low and that we bring in more there. We also have reduced what we anticipate for court fees, again, over 2019. And there's really two main reasons for this. Obviously, the pandemic. And the other reason is the legislation around the legalization of marijuana. I do anticipate, we bring in a lot of revenue from court fees frequently from things that happen at the Art Center, underage drinking. Because of this new legislation, there's really been a big pause and hesitation on what the police department can and can't do as it relates to that. And so for both of those reasons, we're just not having court as much. We anticipate court fees being reduced. To that point, in 2019, we collected over 500,000. Last year, we were way down, about 212,000. So in this year's budget, we anticipate about $225,000 in court fees. So hopefully we'll be right around there. And then lastly, we have the Bell Works pilot. And there's a great deal of uncertainty around that. So for those that don't know, our pilot at the building of Bell Works is based on the amount of money they collect in rents. This is something that, unlike a lot of other aspects of the pandemic, and there's light at the end of the tunnel, and we hope that we're going to be able to gather in the summer, and we have vaccines. The residual effects of the pilot might take years to come about. As offices decide that they're downsizing or don't need as much space, that might affect Bell Works. If they gave any cuts in rent in order to keep some of their tenants, that might affect. So we just need to be really careful. We are anticipating the audit from Bell Works coming in the next couple of weeks, Bill?
Yes, it's usually around this time of year.
So, and that will tell us the story for 2020. We're hoping that it's a good, positive story, but it's something we need to think about. Even if it's a great story in 2020, if there are changes in office use, that might be something that affects. Some highlights, again, I always like to put some good with the bad. Shared services revenue. And for this, I need to applaud Bill and his team. We are this year, we'll be realizing the full amount of our finance shared services agreements with Seabright, Lakehurst, and Allenhurst, which is bringing in money to our township. We are anticipating a flat energy receipts tax. This comes from the state. They have told us to expect the same. So that's a great thing that they're not cutting that and taking that to fill their budget. And then we do have a potential for grants. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Recovery Act later on. But there are several grants out there that we're pursuing. And so that's hopeful additional revenue that we can bring in.
And can I add one thing, and Sharon, that energy receipt tax, although it's flat, it's been flat for the last 25 years. The state 25 years ago took the energy receipts tax out of the hands of the towns and started using it to fund their budget. So technically, under statute, that was supposed to increase every year. And for the last 25 years, the increase has gone to the state coffers and not to the towns.
This is just an overall visual of where our revenues come from. Most 57% raised by taxes, 29% other revenue, and then in this budget, 14% will come from surplus. So just a reminder, a refresher, where does every $100 of your taxes go? Only about 17%, about $17 of every $100 is part of the municipal budget. Although the town sends out the bill, we only are keeping $17 on every $100 that you pay. The rest is completely out of our control. Refresher on the tax rate and how it works. The rate is basically a multiplier which determines how much each property is going to pay. The way we calculate the rate is we determine how much the township needs to raise through taxes in order to support the budget and operate the town. We divide that by the total assessed value of all the taxable property in the township, which is that number that I mentioned earlier. And that's how we get the tax rate. Once you have the tax rate, you take your individual property, you multiply that by the tax rate, and that's how we determine your property tax. So the Holmdel Township proposed tax rate for 2021 is 34 cents, which is the same amount that it was last year. And it's just really important to note that this does not mean that your taxes will stay the same. Want to just emphasize this. And so they won't stay the same. Why? If the tax rate is stable, why won't they stay the same? Well, there's two reasons. One, as I just mentioned, the township is only 17% of your tax bill. So one of the other entities, the school, the county, other budgets, health department, library, any of those can change and therefore affect what you individually will pay in your taxes. And the second thing is the assessed value of your property may increase or decrease. In Monmouth County, we have an assessment program where every property is assessed every year. And so that value could change. So those are the two reasons why, although the municipal tax rate is stable, your tax bill might change. Just to put things in perspective, and so people understand, in Holmdel, a 1 cent change in that tax rate is equal to $429,000. And that means that if we want to change that 34-cent tax rate to 35 cents or 34 cents, we have to adjust either, if we want to decrease that, we have to decrease appropriations by $429,000 or find an additional $429,000 worth of revenue. So that 1 penny has a really, really significant impact on municipal operations. Just overall in 2021, the average assessment for a Holmdel home is $700,000, a little over $700,000, which means that your municipal share of the property tax on that average home is a little over $2,300. Putting it in perspective another way, if we change the municipal budget by $100,000, that's a 0.002 change in the tax rate, which would be about $14 on the average household. Just a reminder how the tax bills work, because it can sometimes be confusing. The state and the county have to certify the tax rate. They don't usually do that until the middle of the year. So we have to send out our first and second quarter bills. So they are only estimates. Once the tax rate is certified, the calculation of what you owe on your property in total is made. We subtract what has already been billed in the first and second quarter, and the remaining balance is split between the third and the fourth quarter. So that means if your taxes change from $16,000 to $16,500, the first quarters, we were using the old estimate of $4,000 each quarter. So you have to make up that $500 difference in the last 2 quarters. Just a little refresher, because it can definitely get confusing sometimes. So just what do you get? You pay about $6.52 a day in municipal taxes. That covers public safety. Our police department responded to over 200,000 calls this year. We broke ground on the new firehouse. I'm sorry, 20,000 calls, not 200,000, my apologies. We broke ground on the new firehouse. Our building and code enforcement, which really protects everyone, over 7,000 inspections and over 5,000 plan reviews. In infrastructure, major, very important role of municipal government. We paved approximately 12% of municipal roads last year. We completed the turf field at Phillips Park. We did energy LED lighting upgrades at Town Hall. Emergency response, or OEM, assisted in several lost missing persons issues. We dealt with the aftermath of the tropical storm last summer and flooding mitigation. Our waste removal, our curbside recycling, our large item drop off, which we had to creatively adjust because of the pandemic last year. We also started a new styrofoam recycling program. And we did this in partnership with Middletown Township. Our recreation department worked hard planning several pandemic events, some of which were virtual. Some highlights though from last year, we had the Drive Boo, which was an incredibly successful event. And they also did a lot of grab and go crafts for families. We did have some senior programs, again, some virtual. We managed to have a senior luncheon in the fall, and we were able to open the swim club, which was, it was a day-by-day decision because we didn't know what we were going to get from the state and the guidance from the state, and if we were going to even be allowed. And so our team did a really phenomenal job of getting that open. And then just the administration of government. I want to, compliment Wendy for managing this very unique mail-in election that we had to deal with last year. And again, this was brand new to everybody, and all of the support staff, all of the team really worked to get a lot done despite many, many challenges in 2020. So I just want to mention, everybody's heard about this American Rescue Plan and the funding that has come from the federal government. It was signed into law on March 11th. We are projected to receive a little over $1.6 million. This could change. These are just the reports that we're being told. We've also been told that the state might be analyzing some of this, so it's not a guarantee. If we do get it, what we've been told is we should get half by about mid-May, and then within another year get the other half. We are definitely waiting for guidance on what it can be spent on. But these three items: provision of government services affected by the pandemic, investments in infrastructure, specifically water, sewer, and broadband, and any other response to the public health emergency. That is very broadly what they have told us is allowable. The funding cannot be used to lower taxes. It's specifically, we have been specifically told that. And the funding does need to be spent by December 31st. And I just want to take a second here to talk about the infrastructure option for some of this funding, particularly sewer. Our sewer system is old and aging. We currently have a 9-year plan for our pump stations. That is over $500,000. We have a multi-phase sanitary sewer repair plan that we need to start implementing. That's the phase 1 of that is over $1 million. We have a repair that we need to do on Mount Drive, which is estimated to cost somewhere between $1.3 and $2 million. This particular sewer line has had several breaks this year, not 1, not 2, but 3 we're up to now. And it has cost, these are emergency breaks, and it has cost us over $150,000 in emergencies. So if we invest a little bit now, perhaps we can avoid some of these emergency expenses. And just, I thought this was interesting when I was shown, this is actually part of the pipe. And if you look at it, you can see how corroded it is. And it literally just, the soil here is very acidic. And it actually created a hole in the line, and it was releasing waste. So this is what we're dealing with, and these are the types of pipes that need to be repaired. So that's kind of an overview of the rescue plan, or at least what we know about it so far. In the narrative that is available to everyone, we kind of broke down every department, and there were specific parts of that. We had highlights from 2020, goals for 2021, lessons and challenges that we faced as it relates to COVID. We again talked about potential revenue generators and things that we need to start thinking about for the future. So if you read through that, that's what you'll see for every department. Now moving on to capital, which is always an interesting, difficult decisions to make. So I want to just have some reminders. The capital budget does not appropriate or authorize funds. This budget that has been presented in no way gives approvals for any of the projects that are mentioned. It is only a recommended plan, which we need to submit by state statute. Due to our size, we have to submit a 6-year plan. So again, this doesn't allocate, it doesn't approve a project. That will have to come later, well after the municipal budget, or after the municipal budget has been approved. So what's in this year's capital? This budget appropriates $275,000 in the capital improvement fund. This is how we put our statutorily required down payment, the 5% down payment that we need to do for any capital expenses. I'm recommending, Bill and I are recommending that we appropriate a little over $5.5 million towards capital this year, which means that we would take on debt of a little over 5.2 million. Now, the reason that we're recommending this, generally speaking, for our town and our budget, I probably would recommend a capital budget around $4 million, unless there was something major that we needed to do. But given the very favorable interest rates that we have right now, and some just significant needs that we have, we're recommending a little bit higher of a capital plan this year. It's a little bit more than what we recommended last year. And basically, most of these recommendations are for road improvements, public safety needs, public facility improvements. And what everyone can note in the budget is, in the narrative, there were two lists of projects. And the first list consists of about $4.5 million worth of projects, which we really need in order to continue government operations. There's a second list. That list has very, very, very important projects. There are several of them. And two that I want to point out is aid to the first aid building improvements, and also furnishing the new firehouse. And again, this is not to be determined in this budget. It's not to be determined tonight, but there are several projects on that list that there is available funding if we move forward with this plan. There's over $750,000 that has not been allocated for projects specifically like that. This is just another visual. These are the debt repayment schedule that we have as of now. It's a 10-year overview. The blue line in the middle is for 2021. This is if we took no additional debt, what we're going to have to pay in the moving forward, which is why we don't want to take $10 million out this year, because we do have some old debt that we have to pay. And so this is just a visual. You can see that line is going up. And as I did last year, these are kind of the capital plan budgeting over the years. So everyone can see how it compares to future years. But again, I can't stress enough when it comes to the capital budget, this is the plan. We allocate a specific amount of money for our down payment. The next step will be to determine which projects we are moving forward with, and then to issue a bond ordinance. That will have to go through two separate meetings of the township committee in order to pass that bond ordinance. And then for each project, there will, as long as it's over $40,000, there will be public bidding and approval from the township committee again. And as I said, the two lists, I apologize if I caused some confusion. It is not that the second list is not important, and it's not that I'm not recommending items on that second list. I think they are very important and that we need to do items that are on that second list. It was just a separation of the first list due to insurance reasons, or just practically speaking, without making, and liability reasons, without making some of those, we'd have a problem to function. That is all I have. Bill, do you have any additions?
I just have one other item. We usually track our fund balance history, and in the year 2017, we used 100% of our fund balance to balance our budget. 2018, we used 99.41. This year, we're down to 77.98%, which is a good trend because that's our cash flow. And, if we're using every dime to support the subsequent year's budget, we have a hard cash flow, and also when we forced to go out and borrow temporary notes just to fund our day-to-day operations. So I'm glad to see that we're not using the complete fund balance just to support our budget. That's the same thing in the sewer and the same thing in the pool, even though the pool went down substantially. We're only using 67% of the fund balance to support the operations for 2021.
And just to sum up, I want to thank Bill, obviously, and the entire Holmdel staff for working to put this together. It's really a great team. That is my presentation. I'm sure nobody wants to hear me talk anymore, but I am more than happy to answer any questions that the committee has.
Thank you, Siobhan. Thank you, Bill, and Bill, your staff, for helping put this together. Very good, very comprehensive, and very positive in keeping the tax rate flat again, which I think our residents can greatly appreciate it with all the hard work and all the other costs that we've incurred during the pandemic. It's really a great job that you and your staff have done.
Thank you.
There are no questions from the Township Committee. I can roll to the regular agenda. Good, cool. First, did the approval of minutes, Wendy, from February 23rd, March 9th, March 23rd?
That's correct. And they were forwarded to the Township Committee on April 7th for review.
Perfect. Do I have a motion?
Move.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Critelli,
Yes.
Mr. Lucarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Santana,
Yes.
Ms. Weber,
Yes.
Mayor Bontempo.
Yes.
The minutes have been successfully approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Next is for agenda items on tonight's agenda only. Any public comment for tonight's agenda items only?
Mayor, before you open up for public comment, I received a request from former Mayor Patton Preveduto, asking me to read his following statement regarding Resolution 2021-112. So I'd like to do that for the benefit of the committee.
You want to do that after public comment, Tom? Right before we do consent agenda?
No, I think we should do it now because he's actually wants to rescind the ordinance, the resolution.
Okay.
9 months ago, I was asked by HYAA baseball parents if I would consider donating a scoreboard at Phillips Park. 8 months ago, I offered a donation to the Township of Holmdel. The intent was to benefit the HYAA baseball and softball players at Phillips Park, Holmdel's youth. The Township Committee waited the entire 8 months until a primary election to act on this donation. Because they've chosen to make an honest donation a political issue, with regret, I am rescinding my offer. This is not about politics. This is about the youth of Holmdel. Unfortunately, to them, politics are more important than our kids. Sent by Patton Preveduto. I guess I'll make a motion that we remove Resolution 2021-112 from the consent agenda at this point.
Second the motion because that's what he wants, it looks like.
That's fine. Roll call, Wendy?
Mr. Critelli,
Yes.
Mr. Lucarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Santana,
Yes.
Ms. Weber,
Yes.
Mayor Bontempo.
Yes.
Okay, so resolution 2021-112 will not be considered this evening.
Thank you, Wendy. Public comment on agenda items on tonight's agenda.
The first public comment is Adam Ardis.
Adam, just state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. My name's Adam Ardis. I live at 10 Colts Drive. I have 3 boys and I coach several of their sports. And you mentioned the budget earlier. So I'd like everyone to note that this weekend, due to the weather, we had 4 out of our 6 games canceled because of the lack of turf fields. And I know this is a recurring theme that you all are dealing with, but it's having significant impact on us, and wanted to bring it to your attention. So I have 2 questions. You mentioned the Phillips Park, and as a lacrosse person, I generally don't care to watch baseball, but I love the fact that Phillips got baseball fields, because I think it's great for the town and for the kids and for the families and for the community. I really do believe it benefits it. So one question is, how did Phillips get approved, and how can we set that course for multi-sport turf fields in other areas of town? And then secondly, again, as it relates to the budget, I thought it was brought up maybe back in 2019 that there was a recreation bond and that there was money left over. And so I'm curious, is there in fact money left over, and where is that being allocated? Thank you again for your time. We appreciate what you do for our town.
Thank you, Adam. So there is money left over. I don't have the exact amount, but not all the money was spent from the initial recreation bond. And I think that a lot of the questions regarding turf fields or fields in general are currently being looked at by our rec committee or rec advisory committee. And I would expect in the near future to have, as they gather information from the various sports in town and what needs are not being met, coming back to the township committee for recommendations on potential options to provide additional facilities to help support them. Carrie?
The next public comment is Joseph Crowley.
Hello?
Hey, Joe, go ahead. Just state your name and address, please.
Sure, Joe Crowley, 15 Ely Road, Holmdel. Couple of comments. First of all, I appreciate the work everybody on the committee has done over the past year with the pandemic. I imagine it was a lot more than anybody expected they were signing up for in most cases. So thank you for that. A couple of questions on rec regarding Greg, your comment. The question I have is, when will we know? You said that there was an excess left over from the rec bond. Can we find out what that figure is? It should be available, I would think. Can we get that for the next meeting? And what is the date for recommendation from the rec committee? And how long would it take to implement any recommendations, or at least to get them in the budget and get things moving forward on them? So I have those two questions for you. The other comment I will make is I've heard about the donation from Pat and Preveduto for months now. I am extraordinarily disappointed. It should not be that hard for us to accept $10,000 that'll go to our kids. I mean, the chatter around the town is that, and I don't know if this is true, but the chatter around the town is that, there was some question about whether or not we'd have his name on it. And in reading the item, it looked like we would allow him to put his name on it, but not the fact that he was a freeholder. And yet my understanding is that election law requires that if he's going to make that donation from excess election funds, then his name would have to be on it. So it seemed like a catch-22 that would prevent him from making the donation. Now, I'd love to hear more about that. And again, if the donation was offered 8 months ago, I'm stunned that we can't have found a way to take $10,000 for our kids. It's shameful to my mind, but I'd love to hear any answers to the questions I asked.
Are you done, Joe?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. So I would expect the rec committee hasn't met until recently. I think they had their first meeting in February-ish timeframe. So they're really just resuming and trying to pick up the pieces. Deputy Mayor, I know, has put a process together to try to gather information because there are multiple groups from all different sports representing boys, representing girls. So I don't have a specific time frame. I know that the conversations I've had, that she's working as quickly as possible to try to come up with something tangible in the not too distant future. So that's positive on that. Regarding the sign, there was a resolution on the agenda tonight to approve the sign. There was some guidance, call it from legal, regarding when you're it wasn't a donation from an individual, it was a donation from an elect account. Elect accounts, funds can only be used for certain things, and there's certain things that they cannot be used for. So the resolution tonight was asking for a specific opinion from the elect board just to state that they, in fact, can be used for the township to purchase a field. And I think that was the best advice that we could do, because we didn't want to be potentially complicit in an issue if, in fact, you couldn't use funds and we accepted funds that weren't allowed. That was a simple ask, and I think it made a lot of sense to proceed that way. Carrie?
The next public comment is Jody.
Could I ask a question before the next person, or do we have to wait till the end?
Let the person go then.
Okay, thank you.
Jody, go ahead.
Hello, my name's Jody Parati, and I live at 25 Candlelight Drive. I'm not even sure if this is the appropriate time to say my comment after hearing the previous gentleman speak, but I will be brief. Myself and a few other women in town are in the process of forming a field hockey clinic, something that hasn't ever been in Holmdel before, so we're really excited about that. Our goal is to have youth teams to feed the high school. As you may or may not be aware, field hockey is a sport that is played almost exclusively on turf fields. Currently, we have one turf field in town and do not anticipate we would have much access to that field. What are the town's plans with respect to building another multi-purpose turf field with lights to support our youth programs? The reality is, without more field space, the field hockey program is unlikely to be able to get started. Thank you so much for your time.
Yes, so I'm not sure that that's really an agenda item, Drew. That would be more appropriate for the public comment at the end. So for going forward, Carrie, please remind people that this is for only agenda items. Any public comment, there's room at the end of the agenda for any open items you want to discuss. They don't necessarily have to be on the agenda. They could be any items like that in general. So I would say I'm better off holding that to the end, Jody, and answering that at the back end of the meeting for you. Committeeman Lucarelli, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, Mayor, just in regards to the last resident's concerns and questions, and I don't know if it was answered, and I don't know if I understood clearly what the actual comments are in regards to not being able for Pat and Preveduto not being able to have committeeman or commissioner on there. Was that a recommendation, again, just by our attorney, by Mike, or is that actual fact that it cannot be on there? I'm just unclear on if this is an opinion or if this is a fact by e-elect or whatever.
I'll interject through the mayor if Mayor Bontempo. Okay. Committeeman Lucarelli, the concern in the first portion of the resolution was specific to ELEC and trying, because a question was raised on the township side. Obviously, it's really a legal question ultimately for the donor, but the township wanted to, as the mayor outlined, be comfortable about the donation being a permissible use of ELEC funds. We typically would have handled that behind closed doors, but given that this was addressed publicly at the last meeting, there was a desire to advance this publicly so that the donation could be realized as quickly as possible, given the public concern, hence the resolution on a conditional basis. The second portion of it, with respect to the title, that was not an ELIC related concern. That was more of a policy concern, and the resolution outlined a concern about politicization and trying to make an attempt to not have the sign serve as a political manner, but that was not a legal consideration. That was a policy one.
Thank you. You answered my question. Thank you very much.
Carrie?
The next public comment is Bill Castning.
Hey, Bill, just state your name and address for the record, please.
Sure. Bill Castning, also known as William D. Castning, 4 Tocaloosa Drive, Holmdel, New Jersey. So thank you for allowing me to make some comments. And first of all, thanks to Sharon and Mr. Antonitis on a really substantive and informative budget presentation. Very impressive, and I learned a lot, and thank you for doing that. One of my comments is procedural, especially given that the length of this agenda was so long. I love the link that takes you to the resolution or the ordinance, what have you, but I would love another link that takes you back to where you left off. So I would ask that you consider doing that. Otherwise I have to scroll to get back to where I was. So if that could be done, that would be certainly would be appreciated. Also want to thank you. As you know, I'm the chair of the Environmental Commission, and I want to thank you for evaluating the HEC comments in spite of them not being taken into consideration for the stormwater ordinance. But thank you again for considering them. Comment on the fowl ordinance. There's one comment there that says chicken and or rooster. Last I heard.
If I can interject, Mr. Castning, you may want to save your comment for the public hearing, which we will be having on that specific ordinance.
Okay.
That it's in the record.
Very good. And also, I guess, therefore, the comment, I have a comment on the EEO section. There's a reference to the Board of Chosen Freeholders, which of course is no longer their name. So you might want to consider changing that. And that's the extent of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I just may, because it might help some other people in terms of the jumping, I suffered with that myself for a while. Depending on how you open the agenda on your computer, there should be an option for you to, on my computer, it's in the top left-hand corner. There's like, I call it the hamburger, 3 lines. You can look at thumbnails, so you can easily get back to the top of the agenda after you click on a link. So it's not a, it's a practical use on the user side. So I just wanted to mention that in case it helps people.
Thank you, Sean. Carrie?
The next public comment is Ron Emma.
Good evening. Ron Emma, 32 Ladwood Drive, Holmdel. I'd just like to say, as a former HYA softball coach, I certainly appreciate the need and would support a new scoreboard. However, the donation from a political campaign at this time seems like an overtly political act to clearly benefit his son, who happens to be a candidate for TC coming up. I actually take a different view. I would applaud the township committee for actually looking into this, whether this is a permissible use of campaign funds. And I would suggest an easy way to get around it. Write a personal check. Secondly, I don't know if this is the time to talk about turf fields, but it was brought up. The timing is interesting, again, with the turf field issue. Why wasn't the turf field issue ever broached last year? So I guess it's going to be a campaign issue. I absolutely am for turf fields. I see the need for turf fields. But I would suggest, why aren't we following the recommendations from the 2018 rec study that recommended the property on the north side of Sats Field, which would be a multi-use field for field hockey, as mentioned tonight, lacrosse, soccer, and football. I'd like to mention that youth football doesn't have a dedicated field to practice at all. So it would have to be a multi-use field. And I think the SATS property would be perfect for that, as again recommended by the rec committee back in 2018. Also, as far as priorities, I also want to recommend everybody that we got a rec survey 3 years ago.
Is this
And
on the
HYA
agenda?
was consulted on the priorities for the $2.5 million bond. Turf fields was not on that priority list. Again, I am a believer that there's a need for turf field, but it has to be an open and transparent process of where the turf fields are going to be and how it's going to be paid for. One last thing, it should be reserved for Holmdel residents and not for the use of private outside clubs.
Thank you. Okay, just state one more time, please. Just stay on agenda items. This is the agenda item question discussion portion of the meeting. For any other comments, please say it to the public comment section at the end of the meeting.
Or campaigning.
Or
The next public comment is Chris Briamonte.
Good evening, everyone. Chris Briamonte, 30 Falcon Ridge Circle in Holmdel. Before I get into my agenda item comments, I just want to point out my conflicts of interest. I'm treasurer of HYAA, been doing that for several years. I've coached in town multiple sports for over a decade. My wife sits on the Board of Education. Tom Curtelli is my cousin. I used to sit on the zoning board, but I was asked not to come back. I'm on the pastoral council at St. Catherine's, and I manage the St. Catherine's annual picnic. I mention my conflicts of interest because certain members of the TC like to point them out whenever I call in, so I figured I'd just get them out of the way now. Next time, I think I'll just say Chris Briamonte with a note, and we'll all know. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Appreciate it. Just regarding DJ's question on the consent agenda, the two conditions that were placed on the donation kind of conflict with what you're saying. So first, I totally agree with the first one. You want a letter stating that it was okay by elect law, and that's fine. But Mr. Collins, I believe, answered the second question, which is your second condition, which states that the donor's name could be on the scoreboard, which doesn't jive with your policy of not getting into politics. We all know who the donor is. So if we're going to allow the donor's name to be on the scoreboard, which is your condition, that's what it says. Why wouldn't we allow the donor's title? We're worried about 3 words? Commissioner of Monmouth County, or whatever his title is? Seems like someone else is playing politics here. And to Ron Emma's point about why is it being brought up now, he approached us 8 months ago, and you all sat on it, and it went nowhere. So I'm really having a hard time understanding why we would allow a scoreboard to go up with a donor's name on it, but we won't allow the donor's title. It's funny because when I go to other recreation facilities around the state, I see plenty of items that have been donated by political people, and it all has their title on it. So it seems like that's the normal course of this process. But for some reason, in your infinite wisdom, you've decided that we would allow a name to be up there. That's not political, but we won't allow a title to be up there. That makes it political, and we don't want that. That's bad policy, as you said, Mr. Collins. Actually, bad policy is denying our kids a brand new scoreboard that somebody wanted to donate in goodwill. Thank you very much.
thank you. Carrie?
There are no other hands up at this time, Mayor.
Okay, I will close the public comment section for agenda items, and we'll move to the consent agenda items 2020-101 through 2020-111. Wendy?
That's correct, Mayor.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Move.
Second.
Second, roll call, please.
Mr. Critelli,
Yes.
Mr. Lucarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Santana,
Yes.
Ms. Weber,
Yes, with a note.
Mayor Bontempo.
Yes.
So resolutions 2020-101 to 2020-111 have been successfully passed.
Thank you, Wendy. For the next introduction of ordinances, Wendy, the 2021-11, I need to recuse Deputy Mayor.
I need to recuse as well.
Sharon, will you take over?
Okay.
So introduction, 2021, 2011, an ordinance establishing procedures and standards regarding deployment of small wireless facilities and public rights of way in the township of Holmdel.
If you don't mind, Administrator, if I could.
Sorry.
I know there were a few questions on this ordinance that were raised this afternoon, so if I could just speak to it for a moment, Administrator.
Yes, thank you.
If the committee pleases. Mr. Matlack is here as well, the township engineer. The ordinance in question is designed to regulate small wireless facilities, which are the structures that are used for 5G cellular service, which is basically the next type of cell service that's going to be deployed. The reason for an ordinance of this nature is that the FCC has legalized 5G and basically obligated municipalities to accommodate wireless carriers that wish to install 5G. 5G is a little different than other frequencies because you need cell locations closer together, as close as 500 feet from each other in order to maintain the 5G cell service to those using it. And as a result, a lot of carriers are looking to use municipal rights of way in order to stage these small wireless facilities. Given the FCC authorization, in the absence of any standards established on the township side of things, it creates an opportunity for carriers to demand use of the right of way in a manner that's unregulated. And so as a result, based upon advice from the township engineer, we crafted an ordinance to require various standards for any wireless carrier that's looking to install in the municipal right of way, so that the town can hold the carriers up to aesthetic standards and other requirements, while recognizing the obligation under federal law. I'll turn it over to Mr. Matlack to kind of speak to some of more of the technical aspects for everyone's benefit.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Yeah, so this ordinance is being introduced, as Mr. Collins said, so that it's not a free-for-all in the right-of-way for utility companies. It allows the township to have some sort of degree of regulation over what utility companies want to install. It allows us to look at line of sight, aesthetics, make sure there are no impacts to sight triangles or pedestrian access. It'll set escrow and review fees, application fees for the township, so that there is no cost to the township. It's all paid for by the applicants or the utility companies who want to install these devices.
And so lastly, I would just say this is by no means the township trying to legalize small wireless facilities, trying to invite them to come into town. This is an attempt to kind of prophylactically establish regulations before carriers are already applying to town. And if they do in the absence of regulations, the FCC order puts the township in a very defensive position to try and impose any aesthetic requirements. So kind of with all that said, certainly happy to answer any questions from members of the committee, and otherwise we would recommend introduction of the ordinance.
Motion to introduce the ordinance.
Second.
Third.
I think we need a roll call for the record.
Okay. Mr. Vitale? Mr. Vitale?
Yes.
Mr. Lucarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Santana?
Yes.
Ms. Weber?
No, she's not.
I know.
That's everyone. Okay.
Okay. I thought you was just going to state it again for the record. Thank you.
And I'd just like to thank Ben and Mike for those for laying that out, because I know that there were some questions from residents today. So thank you for explaining that clearly.
Certainly. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Next one, the 2021-15.
That's an ordinance of the Township of Holmdel, Monmouth County, State of New Jersey, to exceed the 2021 municipal budget appropriation limits and to establish a cap bank, NJSA 40A semicolon 4-54.14. And the motion would be to adopt on first reading and publish in the Asbury Park Press and set the public hearing for May 11th, 2021.
This is what Bill discussed earlier. A motion?
Yes, this ordinance is banking 497,484. It's actually increasing it, 497,484.33.
Thank you, Bill.
Mhm.
Motion, please.
Motion.
Second.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Gattelli,
Yes.
Mr. Lucarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Santana,
You're muted.
Mr.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you. Ms. Weber,
Yes.
Mayor Bontempo.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
then the next ordinance for introduction is 2021-16, which is an ordinance establishing pay-to-play restrictions for prospective developers of affordable housing. This motion would be to adopt on first reading, publish in the Asbury Park Press, and set the public hearing for April 27th, 2021.
Counselor, you want to just touch on what this introduction is?
Sure, Mayor. At the last meeting, Committeeman Santana had made a motion requesting that a pay-to-play ordinance be prepared, which the committee adopted. Based upon that, we put together this ordinance. The expressed concern was the ability of developers to donate to municipal campaigns and then participate in the affordable housing process. So this restricts the ability of developers to donate and then partake in the affordable housing process. It's not applicable to any current affordable housing or anything involving the third round, which has already been approved by the court, and the ordinance is expressly conditioned upon that to not jeopardize what we currently have approved in court. So it's really prospective and would impact any potential future rounds for COA.
Thank you, Counselor. I have a motion, please.
Move. Motion.
Have a second.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Gattelli,
Yes.
Mr. Lucarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Santana,
Yes.
Ms. Weber,
Yes.
Mayor Bontempo.
Yes. Next is hearing on ordinance, Wendy.
Correct. Hearing on ordinance 2021-08, which is an ordinance modifying section 30-157 titled Stormwater Management and Control.
Before I open to the public comment, Counselor, you just want to provide a quick overview on this ordinance, please?
Actually, Mayor, I would probably turn it over to Mr. Matlock, if you don't mind, beyond saying that this is a requirement imposed by DEP, and the ordinance has been reviewed by several different bodies, and it's basically a state law requirement that it be adopted by the committee.
Yes, that's exactly right. The NJDEP have updated their stormwater regulations, and this ordinance changes the township's stormwater regulations to comply with the new state standards.
Thank you. Thank you, Counselor. Thank you, Ben. Any questions from the Township Committee? Carrie, open public comment, please. Carrie, any public comment?
Carrie's there, but I can say that
There's no hands up at this time,
Okay.
Mayor.
A closed public comment. Do I have a motion?
Move.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Gattelli, you're muted.
Yes.
Mr. Lucarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Santana,
Yes.
Ms. Weber,
Yes.
Mayor Bontempo.
Yes.
So ordinance 2021-08 has been successfully passed and will be published in the Asbury Park Press according to law. The next ordinance that's up for a hearing is 2021-09, which is an ordinance establishing rules and regulations for off-leash dog area at Bayonet Farm.
Move.
I got them open for public comment, please.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Carrie, public comment on 2021-09.
There are no hands up at this time, Mayor.
All right, thank you. I will close public portion. Now can I have a motion?
Could I make a comment first?
Absolutely.
Or question, actually. Is it open yet, Sharon? And if not, when is it anticipated opening?
So it is not complete yet, although if you've driven down there recently, it is getting very close. It looks absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
It probably will be complete in the next couple of weeks, and we will allow people to use it. We do want to have a more formal ribbon cutting, but the family has requested that we wait until at least Memorial Day. So we're trying to figure out the best date. I believe their son goes to college out of state and really wants to be there for the official opening. So it'll be right around Memorial Day that we have the official opening, but I expect a soft access to it in the next couple of weeks. And I just want to say, Twin, which is the company that donated a lot of time and a lot of the supplies. It's really, I have a dog, as you all probably heard tonight, my apologies. It's one of the nicest dog parts that I've seen.
Thank you. Wendy?
Do we do public comment, Mayor?
Yep, we closed public comment.
We did?
I'll make a motion to adopt the ordinance.
Okay.
Do a second?
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Critelli,
Yes.
Mr. Lucarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Santana,
Yes.
Ms. Weber,
Yes.
Mayor Bontempo.
Yes.
Okay, so ordinance 2021-09 has been successfully adopted, and it will be published in the Asbury Park Press according to law. The next ordinance for adoption for public comment, public hearing is 2021-10, which is an ordinance amending section 13-1.6 of the revised general ordinances of the Township of Holmdel titled Parks and Recreational Facilities.
Thank you, Wendy. Open for public comment.
First public comment is Bill Castning.
Basically, I think it's a great ordinance. Just the one comment, which is probably a nitpicking. There's one phrase in there that says chicken and or rooster. Last I knew, a rooster was a chicken.
Good catch.
I think we're on 2021-10 still. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
We could probably assign that comment to the next public
To the
hearing.
next one?
But
Okay.
this is on the group size ordinance.
Mhm.
Any other public comment, Carrie?
There are no other hands up at this time, Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. We'll close public comment. Do I have a motion?
Move.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Critelli,
Yes.
Mr. Lucarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Santana,
Yes.
Ms. Weber,
Yes.
Mayor Bontempo.
Yes.
Ordinance 2021-10 has been successfully passed and will be published in the Asbury Park Press according to law. The next ordinance for a public hearing is ordinance 2021-12, which is an ordinance regulation animal control of fowl.
So open for public comment, Carrie.
There are no hands up at this time, Mayor.
So council will move the comment from the last caller from 2010 to 2012, 21-12, I'm sorry. Okay.
As long as Mr. Casting's okay with that, he's welcome to comment again if he so desires, but I think we duly noted.
Thank you. None seen to close public comment. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Critelli,
Yes.
Mr. Lucarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Santana,
Yes.
Ms. Weber,
Yes.
Mayor Bontempo.
Yes.
Okay, so ordinance 2021-12 has been successfully adopted and will be published in the Asbury Park Press according to law.
Wendy,
next-
I need to recuse myself of 2021-13.
And so do I. Need to recuse myself.
Ron?
I can read it,
Yeah.
Mayor. Ordinance 2021-13, which is an ordinance authorizing amendment number 2 to real property lease with T-Mobile Northeast LLC.
Move.
Let's
I'm
open up
sorry,
for-
there's a public comment.
We have to do public hearing first.
I'm anxious.
And there are no hands up at this time.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Move.
Second.
Mr. Catelli,
Yes.
Mr. Lucarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Santana?
Yes.
Okay, so ordinance 2021-13 has been successfully passed and it will be published in the Asbury Park Press according to law. And that's the end of the ordinances this evening.
Thank you, Wendy. Roll to departments. CFO, can I start with you since there's a lot on the agenda for you tonight?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. First resolution we have is required by state statute. The governing body has to approve the resolution with compliance with the enforcement guidance on consideration of arrest and conviction records and employment decisions under Title 7 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And in order to get your budget approved, that has to be, resolution has to be adopted and signed by all the members of the governing body.
So do you need a motion on that, Bill?
Yes.
You have a motion for the a resolution 2021?
Move.
Second.
A roll call, Wendy?
Mr. Catelli,
Yes.
Mr. Lucarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Santana,
Yes.
Ms. Weber,
Yes.
Mayor Bontempo.
Yes.
Okay, so resolution 2021-113 has been successfully passed.
Second resolution is the actual resolution to introduce the budget. This states that the budget will be a summary of the budget will be published in the Asbury Park Press on April 23rd. And we will have a hearing on May 11th at 7:30, either at the municipal building or on Zoom, depending on the situation at that time. Now we just need a roll call to approve the budget as presented tonight.
Bill, if I could just clarify before the committee goes ahead, I know the administrator had mentioned a couple of minor modifications at the top of her executive report. Do they affect any of the numbers within the budget? I just want to note for the record in case any modifications.
The numbers
need to
that
be
are
made.
presented here, yes, they will be, and the revised ones will be put up online.
Okay, so if the committee makes a motion here, I would recommend that it take into account those modifications. This is not going to be a budget amendment, though, as I want to clarify, because that is its own unique process. If we introduce tonight and we change the numbers, we would have to undergo a budget amendment, but this is simply introducing it with that proviso.
Yeah, and again, the reason for the amendments was because the actual certified assessed value of the properties did decrease. So in order to keep the 34-cent tax stable, we had to make an adjustment to the amount of fund balance utilized and reduce the amount of taxes to be raised.
So you wanted a motion, Bill, with the amendments presented tonight?
Yes, that'll be our introduced budget with the ones with the amendments.
Okay, we have a motion.
Move.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Catelli,
Yes.
Mr. Lucarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Santana,
Yes.
Ms. Weber,
Yes.
Mayor Bontempo.
Yes.
Okay, so resolution 2021-114 has been successfully passed with the modification.
Thank you, Wendy.
You're welcome.
Bill?
And the other two items are just, the presentation that was given tonight, they'll be put on the web. And the public hearing, again, will, if anybody from the public wishes to comment, that'll be on May 11th.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. And thank you for all your work tonight, Bill.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it. Administrator, updates from you.
I know I've talked a lot tonight. I just wanted to give everyone an update. At the last Township Committee meeting, I was asked to work with the attorney and engineers on updating our municipal ROSI. Started out seeming like a very simple update. Working on it, we've uncovered that there are additional updates, like block and lots have been changed. So we are working through that, and I expect to have a report to the Township Committee shortly. But I did just want to clarify at that last meeting, Mayor, you mentioned particular property that may be to talk to the county about a particular property on Cross Farms and the property across the street from the high school. So I just wanted to confirm, should I be reaching out to the county to start those discussions?
I like you to continue. I had discussions with them about a year ago regarding potentially taking the farmhouse, renovating it historic on Cross Farms, and it's actually where it's situated is actually very close to Thompson Park. So I would like you to continue those discussions and then come back to the Township Committee and see if we can do a more equitable call it a land swap of, X amount, 16 acres for 16 acres. I think that they could do a great job with that farmhouse, and we could certainly, if they're open to it, give us the property across from the high school for future recreational use.
Sounds good. As long as the entire Township Committee, I will work on that as I work on the Rossi updates.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
I don't have any other updates tonight, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions that the members may have.
Anything for Sharon? Cool. Thank you, Sharon. And again, thank you for all your work too on putting the budget in the presentation this evening. Counselor, any updates from you?
No update, Mayor. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Ben, engineer, anything from you?
Just briefly, Mayor, paving work was completed on Crawford's Corner Road, as you probably saw. The contractor did a very nice job, and I'd like to especially thank the police department. They did an excellent job helping direct traffic and also coordination with school buses and helping to coordinate everything. So it came out well.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Any questions for Ben? None being seen. Cool. We can run to boards and committees. Committeeman Lucarelli, any updates from you?
Thank you, Mayor. No, Ben stole my thunder. I wanted to mention about the paving and compliment Sharon and Victor Stevens on their preparations for that project and oversight with the contractor. That did a great job, and it looks wonderful. But that was all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry,
Committeeman Santana.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of things. First, I'd like to thank Sharon and the administrator and our CFO, Bill, on a fantastic budget presentation. I've actually reviewed it, and I do have questions, but I'll come back to you offline. So thank you again for a great budget. And I specifically looked at one item, which is the increase in the budget from previous year. It's 3%. That's perfect. I'm glad it's well controlled and monitored. So I'm very happy with this. And I'm also happy with the fact that Bill mentioned that our fund, we're using only 77% of our fund balance. So that's a very good sign that we have a healthy budget, which will be very good when we issue bonds, because the bond rating will be, folks that buy our bonds will be keen on looking at those aspects of the budget. Okay, the last I have is the planning board. There is a meeting on the next Tuesday on Barclay Square. I just want to let people, residents of the town, know about that and please attend. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Committeeman Cortelli.
No report, Mayor, but I do want to compliment our fine business administrator for a tremendous job on the budget. As always, everything you seem to do for us is over the top, very professional. And I, for one, and I speak for the entire committee and a lot of residents, we appreciate all your efforts. You've done a hell of a job in less than a year and a half. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Yes, I'll just add my thanks, and it is wonderful to get a budget in English and be able to understand it. Very different than what we have had historically. So pleased to have that. I just have one report from the rec committee. Thanks to DPW, first of all, for responding to the deer that was on one of the fields at Cross Farm. And an interesting note that there was a bald eagle actually feeding off that deer on the field.
Wow.
So kind of a cool nature thing that we have bald eagles at Cross Farm, understand their nests at Swimming River Reservoir. Other general rec reports, sports are back in full swing. We have a lot of programs going on, yoga on the farm, summer rec, swim club. As Sharon mentioned, registration is running ahead of 2019. And I was particularly pleased to see an increase in family registrations. So that's fantastic. And USA sports classes, things coming up. They're talking about planning a family barbecue event on June 11th, and the community garden will be kicking off and growing. And of course, then we're all waiting for the opening of the dog park. The rec committee did discuss field needs. Bob Ward is sending out a request to all the sports teams to come back with information on their number of players, their needs, their usage, so we can get our handle on that. He also is going to have a report for the committee on the use of Rogie Field and the school fields. The issue was also raised about the field at Village School and the poor condition that it is in. That is a Board of Education field. Pete Reddy is on the committee, is on the Board of Ed, and said he was going to address that with their buildings and grounds people to see if they could get that field in more playable condition. And we've also suggested the Board of Ed could return that field to the township for the $1 we sold it to them a couple decades ago, so that the township could address the quality of that field. So we just, we're working on this. We're looking to get some hard data and information so that we can make some recommendations. Simultaneously, the administration, Bob Ward and Sharon Roundtree, have had discussions with several organizations and are continuing those discussions to look at options. And the only one thing I want to share with the public that everyone might not be aware of when it comes to fields is that most of our available field space in this town is under green acres. And as such, any field on green acres has to be available to any team in the state of New Jersey. The only fields that we can restrict to Holmdel residents only is if there is a field on township wholly owned non-green acres property. So a lot of people don't realize that distinction. So that is something that we're also cognizant of. So looking forward to getting that information back and some recommendations, seeing how we can move forward.
Thank you. Couple updates. First, I want to say how grateful I am to the members of the Holmdel community who participated in our Township Committee's Easter donation drive. Because of the generosity of our residents, we were able to donate a substantial number of frozen hams and turkeys to Fulfill. Fulfill is formerly known as the Food Bank of Ocean and Monmouth counties, and they have been in desperate need of replenishments. We're also able to donate dozens and dozens of grocery store gift cards, which will allow Fulfill to purchase needed food for families they serve. On behalf of the Township Committee colleagues, myself, I want to thank everybody who supported and donated this to a very worthy cause. Staying on the Easter theme, I was at the Easter egg hunt that the rec department ran at Cross Farms. And they did it in a very safe environment. They had multiple flights going out, I think 6 or 7 flights, half hour apart, with a limited number of following the governor's executive orders per flight. They went from the famous Easter egg hunt themselves to collecting a goodie bag of some arts and crafts, and then they got a picture with the Easter Bunny, and then a picture of a Holmdel sign with the Happy Easter on it. So very great, super turnout, great response from the people who came out. Every flight was filled with children, and the rec department managed it, so it was a Holmdel only event. It was another great job by Bob and team on running an event for the community. On the Holmdel vaccination accommodation program, the team and administrative staff is making some incredible progress. Just to give kind of an order of magnitude, I think this is pretty important. The program has assisted just almost 4% of the town's population in getting a COVID vaccine. So people who were in need, people who were eligible, people who were qualified, people needed help. Sharon's team with Brian and Alice and everybody else have really done, and Eric Hernando at OEM have done really an amazing job. And these guys go above and beyond to try to accommodate everybody in their schedule. Things are changing because as of this Monday, the 19th, it's opening up to all New Jersey residents over the age of 16. So it's really going to get busy. We are fortunate to still have 2 vaccination sites in town, one at Bayshore Hospital and the other one over at Bellwork. So we're certainly getting our fair share of the vaccine, and we really want to thank the staff for doing an incredible job in helping out. So many people who needed help, and literally they go out if needed to your home, if you don't have internet, and get you registered so you can get in queue and get your vaccine, your first dose, and obviously your follow-up second dose when you get your first vaccine appointment. Important, we have a town-wide cleanup this Saturday. It's running from 9 to noon at, I think we're meeting at the Senior Center right next to Town Hall. Come out, community students that need community hours, come on out. Looking for a great turnout. We have, it's ironic that I've gotten emails from residents with pictures pointing out areas that need to be cleaned up. So those are going to be hit on top of all the other lists that Victor and the DPW guys have put together. So looking for as many people that are able to come out, please come out for a couple hours on Saturday to help with our annual townwide cleanup event. That is all I have. With that, if there's nothing else from the committee, I can open it up, Carrie, to public comment.
The first public comment is Sheila Gilstein.
Hi, Sheila, just state your name and address for the record, please. Sheila, you on mute?
No, I'm not. Sheila
Okay.
Gilstein, 11 Chardonnay Drive.
Okay.
I fully support the mayor's motion to put the 115 acres at Cross Farm Park and including the 3 parcels of land, which is about 93 acres near Bayonet Farms, be put on the Rossi to preserve our open space. I feel we want to preserve this land for future generations. It should be noted that some of this land at Cross Farm, and I'm not sure about Bayonet Farm, but I believe so, if it was acquired using Green Acres funding, then these acres are already encumbered and have to be listed on the Rossi the next time Holmdel receives Green Acres funding. This is a beautiful part of Holmdel, and it definitely reflects the rural and bucolic nature of our town. So I hope we can continue to keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you. And one of the comments that the administrator made earlier was that as she's been going through with the engineer and with the attorney, she's finding things and wants to make sure that our records are correct, accurate, and clean. So however the committee decides to move forward with the land, it will be done in the appropriate manner. So we're not going to rush it. We're going to do it correctly and make sure we don't miss anything. So we'll be in good shape no matter what decision the township committee makes.
Yeah.
Carrie?
Mayor, I think it's important just to mention to the residents that regardless whatever happens, whether it's on the Rossi or not, that land is always intended to be preserved. And I think that's important for, everyone to know that.
Yep. Carrie?
The next public comment is Tom Wood.
Hi, this is Tom Wood. I'm at 20 Heather Hill Way in Holmdel. So I'd just like to follow up on the recent comments that Sheila made, and Ms. Roundtree also commented on this activity from the Township Committee to put additional land on the Rossi. I think it's a great idea. We've all become very used to the land in question, both at Cross Farm Park and at Bayonet Farm, being open and available for all sorts of open space uses. I think that's a tremendous thing. I think almost everybody would like to see that. It is in fact not just theoretical, but in fact, within recent memory, certain politicians, I believe it was Pat Proveduto when he was mayor, had proposed selling off some of the land in question, both at Bayonet Farm and at Cross Farm Park, to private interests in order to close the budget deficit. And putting this land on the Rossi would at least, hopefully prevent that in the future, and would at least make it much more difficult. So I applaud the committee for moving forward in this direction. I applaud the staff for taking the time to make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And so thanks very much.
Thank you.
The next public comment is Jerry Buffalino.
He's on mute.
All right, Jerry, just state your name and address for the record.
Sorry, I think I was muted. Jerry Buffalino, 20 Barbera Drive, Holmdel, New Jersey. I also want to reiterate my support for what we just heard from Sheila and Tom, specifically regarding the properties along Middletown Road and Stillwell Avenue, which the town already owns, so it's not going to cost us anything in terms of open space taxes and the like to buy that property. We already have it. And I understand what DJ is saying, but I know the current town council wouldn't do anything in terms of wanting to sell it, but who knows, 10 years from now, things might be different. And that property might come up and disappear. When I first moved into this town 25 years ago, I was really impressed because I read a publication that the town described itself as suburban rural. I don't see that phrase rural being used anymore in the description of our town. So to me, the preservation of these pieces of land, Cross Farm Park, certainly the southern portion of it by Willowbrook Road, definitely. It's next to our drinking water supply. That should take precedence over everything for preservation. And also the property that was identified across from Bayonet Farm and Middletown Road. Those roads stand out to be the most beautiful roads in our entire town. To risk allowing them to be in any way developed or decimated in any kind is terrible. It destroys the character of our town, I think, personally. So we hope that when Sharon is finished with the Rossi list and getting that together, that you'll seriously consider also putting those locations together with the Rossi. And it may, in fact, as Sheila pointed out, be already an obligation of the town to do that under Green Acres regulation. So we look forward to seeing that. And I do want to commend the town council, both the current and the former town councils, on the preservation of land in Holmdel. You've done a wonderful job, really, over the years in doing this. And so we hope you'll continue. And you'll have our undivided support to do that.
Thank you.
The next public comment is Chris Trichetta.
Good evening. I just came up, Christopher Trichetta, I'm the EMS chief for Holmdel First Aid Squad. I just came from my first aid squad meeting, and our squad would like you to know that we're very much looking forward to the renovations that the architect is preparing for the first aid building, and hoping our sole capital improvement item gets moved to the recommended column in capital, especially after enduring this past year of the pandemic as frontline healthcare workers. Have members that stayed at the building sitting on chairs donated by Bell Labs 30 years ago. Not really the best circumstances, but I was grateful that they chose to stay so that calls were answered quickly. So I'm really looking forward to the next Township Committee meeting for further consideration.
Chief, thank you for jumping on the call. You and your staff have probably done a yeoman's work in the last year with the pandemic. I know firsthand from the amount of calls I was on with you and the chief of police and the fire chief and the head of OEM, the amount of calls you were taking on a daily basis, the amount of PPE you burned through because of the virus that was going on. And, I can tell you that, you and your organization's work is not forgotten. It's on the top of my list as a priority to make sure that people that, take care of our residents are taken care of as well by the Township Committee. So, we will do our best to work with you and make sure that the projects that we need to get done, and you guys will be able to continue to support our residents as you've been doing so well for so long, and especially this past year with the pandemic, have really gone above and beyond and have not shied away from, no matter how many calls you guys get a day, you are there at every single call that comes in for help. So I thank you for everything you do. Eric?
Mayor Bontempo, I'd like to make a quick statement here.
Sure.
So I concur with Mayor Bontempo on this. There are some key items that we need to, those are imperative that we need to include in our capital requirements list, and that being some of the renovation work. So I hear what you're saying, Chief Trichetta. We'll work hard to see how best we could include those items.
Thank you.
The next public comment is Bill Castning.
Bill Castning for Takalusa Drive, Holmdel. So I also want to commend the Township Committee for updating its ROSI and including the 80 plus or minus acres across from Bayonet Park. I think that's very important. And not only personally, but from my role as the executive director of Monmouth Conservation Foundation, we've worked with Holmdel and other municipalities in the county to preserve property, whether it be open space for active or passive rec, or the protection of water, or for protecting wildlife, etc., and farmlands throughout the county. And as many of you might recall, we were instrumental in obtaining the Chase Tract, the former Chase Tract, and making sure that that was preserved, which now became part of Holmdel Park, as well as part of the farmland opportunities that exist as well. So I commend them, I support it, but I do caution you that whatever you place on the ROSI is very difficult to get off. So certainly the parcel across from Bayonet Farm is important, and that should stay on, but definitely analyze and carefully look at all the smaller properties that aren't currently on the ROSI to make sure that that they either shouldn't be placed on or they should, because it requires an act of God to have them removed, and you don't want to go through that process. I've done that in helping other municipalities, and it requires State House Commission approval, Garden State Preservation Trust approval, Green Acres approval. So be very careful. But again, I applaud you on your preservation efforts, both past, current, and future. Thank you.
Thank you. One other important note is shortly after the last Township Committee meeting, I kicked off the first Agricultural Committee meeting, which the importance of the Agricultural Committee meeting is based on the planning session Township Committee had back in February. We decided that we would look to potentially pursue other available land that hasn't been developed yet and potentially acquire it for farming, for open space, or potentially for recreation as well. And so there are multiple fronts going on right now, because I really feel that 2021 is a crossroads of importance, because after these few plots of land are acquired, developed, there's not going to be there'll be very little additional open space available for build out. So a lot going on this year with looking at open space and what we can do to keep the town the way it currently is, and why a lot of people moved here. Carrie?
The next public comment is Regina Crisione.
Hello, Regina Crisione, 35 Rambling Brook Drive. I have a comment and a question. The first is the cleanup that you have on Saturday. I don't know if you're aware, but Clean Ocean Action is having their big beach sweep. Did I say Wednesday? I meant Saturday. Their big beach sweep on Saturday. And that's pretty much the whole, a lot of the New Jersey shoreline. So in the future, you may want to consider just looking at the date so there's no conflict. Okay, that's number one. And the second one is a question about the land across farm going on the Rossi. Regardless of what lands you're actually talking about when you break it up into the different parcels around the farmhouse and the other section, would it be possible in negotiating with the county that we can put some kind of restrictions on the land that they get if they take any of it?
Restrictions in what way?
That certain things that they can't put on it, considering the proximity of that land to the reservoir. We really have to be careful if they're putting turf fields, if they're putting any kind of development. That is something that we should think about.
Absolutely. It'll be done publicly, so you'll be able to comment before any action is taken by the Township Committee.
I'm asking if in negotiations that will be brought up with the county.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Is that it, Regina? Good.
The next public comment is Ron Emma.
Ron Emma, 32 Ladwood Drive. As far as the land swap, the 115 for 15 acres across from the high school, I don't see how anyone would think that that's an equitable swap. I do agree with Mayor Bontempo's proposal to, scale that down 15 for 15, 10 for 15, whatever that swap is with the farmhouse. But I do want to emphasize what Deputy Mayor Weber said, that even if we do get that land, it's Green Acres. So that means it's open to anyone in the state of New Jersey to use that land. So if we're going to do this for the kids, because we keep hearing that over and over again, for the kids, I would propose we do it for our kids, the township citizens. So if we're going to do that for our kids, why not look at land we already own, which again would be the Sats piece of property north of Sats, where the Germanario softball field is. Potentially, there's land up at the high school. Again, these are Board of Ed owned properties, but again, we're such a small town. We should be able to come to an agreement with the Board of Ed to do some sort of swap. So again, it's in the spirit of doing it for our kids. We should be able to work that out. And I also would throw out there that, there was a proposal way back when for the swim club, even though it was kind of done underhandedly and under the radar. But that might be a viable piece of land that we already own. So maybe we don't even need the piece of property across from the high school. Again, I do see the need for turf fields. It's just got to be in the right location. Secondly, I've been an ardent supporter of public safety. Now that we have our new fire truck and a new firehouse. It's really time to pay attention to the needs of our dedicated EMS squad. At the early February budget meeting, a marathon budget workshop meeting, Committeeman DJ Lucarelli indicated that he was willing to defer the improvements requested by EMS to next year or the following year budget. So I'm saying EMS is requesting money to renovate that Crawford's Corner station. I would support everything that could be done to get that money included in this year's budget. So my question is, what can we do as citizens to see that this does get the attention that it needs and that it is included in this year's budget? Thank you.
So I think right now, based on the presentation, the Township Committee, all the members have a chance to understand what is on the list and what they're going to be supporting going forward. I think it's fairly unanimous that, you know, emergency services are on the top of the list for that, and more to come on that. But I can tell you, as I work closely with these guys all year, our emergency services personnel, all of them, volunteers or paid, are second to none. They really have, we are fortunate to have such an amazing organization, and we need to do whatever we need to, whenever we can, to properly support them and give them the tools they need to take care of our residents. And I don't think that's going to change from my perspective.
And Mayor, if I may, I just want to
Go ahead.
clarify that no capital expenses are being approved in this budget. It's just setting aside money for a down payment for a future bond for future capital. The budget actually does not approve or not approve any capital expenses specifically.
Just to reconfirm that, it's giving the ability of how much we could bond for at a future date to be able to get our capital needs met.
Exactly.
Okay.
I just want to clarify so everyone knows.
And I appreciate that, because it's worth clarifying so everyone can understand.
And Mayor, could I comment? I was called out there, so could I make a statement? Well, not a statement, but can I respond to Mr. Emma's statement?
Yes.
Thank you. So, you know, again, that's being taken out of context. So that was a, you know, we were having a roundtable discussion about initiatives, capital improvements. And the reason I made the comment that I made is because at the time I don't believe, and I didn't believe that the firehouse would be out of that building, in the new building and operational in this year. So if that is going to be the case, if it is going to be operational and the EMS is going to take over the building, then I'm 100% for the funds that the EMS needs to improve that building. I made that clear to Sharon after the roundtable, because I said to her, I bet you my comments will be taken out of context and used against me, just like they were tonight. So I just want to clarify that for everyone to understand, is that at the time we were having that, I didn't really think that that building was going to be operational, or that space was going to be allocated to the EMS, and that the firehouse would be up and running and everything would be shifted around. I thought that would be for next year's budget. And that's what I made that comment for. But if it is available, I'm 100% for funding it as soon as it's ready.
Just a side note, I had a conversation with the architect last week, and he, I don't want to jinx it, so I'm knock on wood, that things are moving very well with the firehouse, and he expects it to be completed in the November, December timeframe this year. So, so that's why the furniture need is potentially in the budget. Sharon, do not shake your head. Sharon, do not shake your head. and the first aid as well that are going to be probably two important things that we have included in the capital for later this year. Terry?
The next public comment is Francine Campus.
Francine Campus, 2 Country Squire Lane, Holmdel, New Jersey. I first want to just applaud the Township Committee, the staff of this town and everything for what a wonderful job they have done during COVID with the developments of the fire, the budget. I truly am grateful as a citizen of Holmdel for the great work that's been done. Thank you. And I would just want to say I concur. I won't go through what Jerry, Sheila, and Tom have said concerning the open land, but I am in full, concurrence with them, their issues that they have brought up. I think the open space in this town is a very important and valuable asset that we should be very careful about. And I applaud the mayor for looking to make a more equitable trade, and the staff for making a more equitable possible trade with the county, and for looking into upgrade our Rossi inventory. I've seen living in this town over the years where our open space has been challenged to be used for very short-sighted or temporary budget concerns, which I think is wrong. We saw that during COVID when the county closed the parks, our parks were able to stay open, which I think from a mental point of view is a wonderful thing for this town. So I think it's an important, definitely important issue. And I've just been being involved over the years. I've heard about the rec fields and what we need. I'm not opposed to turf fields, which has been mentioned here. It's just a question of where and appropriately done and having the appropriate funds to do it. But, like to just give an example of those fields by the school, let's get that issue done. Let the Board of Education give it back if they don't want to fix it up. It's land we have, our children need it. Let's fix up what we have. I think I've been saying this, I'm a broken record. Fix up what we have before we decide to move on and take apart other open space. But we really need it. And the school's property is for the same kids, that's the town's. They're all the same. I pay my bill, it's school tax, municipal tax, it's all the same. And just to end up, my last question is concerning Cross Farms and the land we get from the county. Is this all green acres? Like, is the stuff we're going to get from the county for the swap green acres? Because that means that we have to give it to other town teams to use. And if there is any land in Cross Farms that's not green acres, let's make sure that's the land we keep. So I see I'm coming to the end of my 3 minutes, so I'll stop here. But I'd like to end on thank you very much for your efforts so far.
Thank you. Sean, you want to confirm the land across the street from the high school?
Yeah, the land across the street from the high school that we have been discussing is Green Acres land. So it does have to be open to the New Jersey public. There are parts of Cross Farm that are Green Acres land, and there are parts of Cross Farm that are not on Green Acres. We are kind of sifting through that. That's part of the complications that we had when we encountered the Rossi.
Thank you. Thanks, Sean. Terry?
The next public comment is Joseph Crowley.
Joseph Crowley, 15 Ely Road. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. The clock's not running. Oh, I had a couple extra seconds there. Question I have on the Green Acres property. If we get Green Acres property, do a swap like people are talking about for whatever land, could we, does Holmdel have first right of use? Or is it open to anybody anytime? My impression was that we still had first right of use for Holmdel residents or something like that. So I'd like to get some clarification on that. And I do support open spaces, and as many of the people on the call have said, I also think that as many people have mentioned, our kids do need more fields. A turf field would be a wonderful thing, and I think it's realizable if we kind of put our minds to it, our hearts to it, and get it done. That's all. Thank you. I'd like to hear an answer on the Green Acres thing if anybody knows it.
Yeah, absolutely. We have that answer. So is administrator or counsel, you want to answer that?
I'm happy to, and if
Yeah.
So if the township owns property that is Green Acres, we do have the ability to schedule, we have the ability to permit it. We just can't schedule and permit it to the extent that it would never be open to the general public of the state. So yes, we do have control. It would be our scheduling. It would be our permitting. But there has to be an opportunity for people throughout the state to be able to use it at some point.
So someone would be able to request use of the field for a game or practice, and we'd have to grant them that.
Yes, a great example would be how we use Cross Farm. A lot of the soccer fields that are on Cross Farm are Green Acres funded, and we schedule games, we have practices there regularly. We have municipal control there.
And there's also teams from out of town that use those fields as well, Sean, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Hopefully that answered your question, Joe.
Mayor, if I could
Yeah.
make a comment.
Yeah.
I just want to make a general comment about turf fields. I know we get a new requests or new turf field requests each year. We did turf fields at Phillips Park last year, and there are new requests now this year. I just want people to be aware of a couple of things. First, that it's not a one-time investment. It costs roughly about $1 million, and you need to redo it every 10 years. That means you have to bond. If you put a turf field in some spot, you have to start planning to bond or include a $1 million bond every 10 years. Now, you just saw the budget that the administrator showed you, and our debt service costs are increasing. We're at $3.5 million, I believe, and it's increasing. So it's important to understand, we may have a lot of needs, but we need to prioritize them going forward, because our debt service cost is increasing. And as such, any annuity type investments, like where you've got to start bonding $1 million every 10 years, is potentially going to escalate that debt service cost. So we need to think about that before we jump in.
Thank you. Carrie?
The next public comment is Chris Briamonte.
Hi, Chris Briamonte, 30 Falcon Ridge Circle, Holmdel, New Jersey. With a note, thank you. Deputy Mayor, I love the smile, thank you. Sharon, just wanted to drill down to that question more regarding the scheduling, right? So you mentioned, because this is an important piece of information. So to me, that spot across from the high school is the perfect location for many reasons. Number one, the township owns it, so we control it. Number two, the school could still use it. And we know that there are certain sports programs in the school that has to come back at night to practice because there's not enough turf time. So if they had the ability to walk across the street and use the turf during the day, that would be great. And then our recreation kids can come on at night. To me, it's the perfect location. But if there's an issue with, we now have to schedule equal time for out-of-town teams, then that may be a concern. So we need to go down that route. So right now at Cross Farms, while we do have some fields that are used by others, it's my understanding in scheduling many years of softball at Cross Farms that we always had the first right in Holmdel. But and listening to you, Sharon, it sounds like, but at some point, we need to open up time for other county residents. Is that, could that be a block time? Can we say like the first Friday of every month is open to the public, but the rest of the time would be Holmdel first? I want to get more facts on that. And then I have another comment after that, if you don't mind. Thank you.
You want to answer now, Chris?
No, I want Sharon to speak, and then I'll go second.
That's what I mean. You want to answer now?
Yes, please answer now. Thanks,
Okay.
Mayor.
I would say it's not like a hard set rule, like you need 50-50 or 25-75. It's not like that. It's you just have to have the opportunity for people, and it doesn't necessarily have to be teams. You just have to have the opportunity for people from around the state to be able to access that. So, and Mike, jump in if I'm missing anything. It's not like a specific amount of time or percentage of time. Rather, it's it just has to be open. It really only gets challenged when there are towns that like refuse to let anybody else play on the field.
It's a standard that's contained in the DEP regulations, but admittedly, we would be at the whims of DEP. And I've dealt with other towns where DEP comes in and says that you're violating the Green Acres regulations. You need to remediate by taking X or Y steps. And so DEP has a significant amount of discretion for preserved property. And if someone were to file a complaint with the state, we would have to deal with DEP and hope to avoid a violation with whatever provisions they impose.
Okay. Thank you, guys. I think that's some important points for our continued conversation about getting our kids, what they need. Lastly, to Mr. Santana's point about having to find another $1 million every 10 years for our kids to have fields to play on, I'll sign up for that every day of the week. Thank you.
There are no new hands up at this time, Mayor. Oh, I'm sorry. J&L is the next public comment.
Okay.
Good evening, Jay Yanello, 18 Ladwood Drive. As someone brought up earlier, I just have to call it out. We've been hearing for years, but it's for the kids, but it's for the kids, but it's for the kids. And listen, I love kids. I have kids. I know the kids need resources. I know they need more sports infrastructure, but you also have to look at the ways and means in which a lot of this stuff has been approached. Whether it was the Capelli Soccer Montropolis Olympic Park on Main Street in South Holmdel, which was going to ruin South Holmdel, had conflicts, private interests, this and that, but it's for the kids. Whether it was the soccer stadium with 80-foot light towers at Cross Farm Park with no regard for the turf degrading into the stream, into the reservoir, with no regard for like having Jesus floating above Cross Farm Park forever when the lights would be glowing in the night games. But it's for the kids, but not the soccer club that has $500,000 of cash on the books. Whether it was for slipping the turf field and light towers at the pool club in bills payable consent agenda with staples and copy paper, $2 million. But it's for the kids, right? It was just for the kids. And now this scoreboard with, if you saw that article that came out today with some of the details behind it, and it wasn't 9 months, it was more like 5 to 6 months, but it's for the kids, right? I realize the kids need some more infrastructure, but if you're going to say it's for the kids, you have to realize that there's a lot of baggage and conflicts that come along with a lot of this stuff. And if you want to be taken seriously with your line, it's for the kids. You need to acknowledge that. The other thing I find a little curious, many areas of this town were terrorized with the idea of stadiums and light towers for the soccer club. The soccer clubs need more turf. We need more soccer. This is from the clubs that, because we don't have great fields, but they advertised at the same time on their website how great their infrastructure and their fields were. I find it just very curious now. We're not hearing a peep about the need for soccer fields. We're hearing now the latest women's field hockey. We're hearing from lacrosse and we're hearing from football, but not one peep for months about soccer fields. I find that a little curious. But it's amazing. They all use the well-rehearsed line, multi-purpose turf fields, which obviously would have soccer markings. I'm not against soccer, but I just find it really curious. We're not hearing a peep from soccer. The final thing I want to say is that at the last meeting or the one before, I mentioned concern about Bellworks revenues, pilot revenues, and candidly, it was kind of discounted. But now I'm hearing, and I'm not passing judgment that it was discounted. Obviously, we get new updates. I'm just curious, have we gotten any sort of body language to suggest now, since the last comments that were made, that things may not be so great going forward because of the things Sharon has mentioned, the need not to have so much real estate anymore. Thank you. I'd like just some feedback on that.
So regarding the Bell Works, I don't have a good indication, and I meet regularly, as does Sharon, with the representatives from there, and I couldn't give you a solid answer because nothing has been provided to me. Have we asked? Yes. Have we been told that they've had challenges last year? Absolutely. I met with them multiple times during the pandemic when that building was empty, when I was virtually the only person in the building for a meeting, and there was nobody there. Is it getting better? Yes. If you walk through the building on a weekday now, I think you'll see a lot of activity. I think the retail shops are starting to bounce back. I think having the vaccination site there has been a positive impact for the retailers that are on the main level. They are continuing to drive to fill up the open space that's in the building, whether it's on the main floor which is mainly retail, to the other office vacancies that are throughout the building. We had some businesses that downsized during the pandemic because they changed the way they operate and they work, as many businesses did, where they're not bringing that many people back to the office, even when the pandemic is finally over and life gets back to what our old normal was. So it's hard to say, but as our CFO indicated earlier, he does expect financial audit records from them in the next couple of weeks, which will be a good indication of kind of where they land. Township Committee did some things last year to kind of help them get through it, which should hopefully generate some additional revenue for us, but the help that we try to provide to them to keep them afloat, because they are a very important part of our community, and we want them to do well, because when they do well, obviously the town can do well at the same time. Administrator, you want to add anything to that?
I think you covered everything I would say.
Could I make a comment,
Sure.
Mayor? Yeah. So this topic came up at the most recent Board of Ed meeting as well. They wanted to know more about pilot money. There seems to be a perception out there that we are at max capacity at Bell Works, and we are receiving a lot of funds from there. So I just want to make it very clear what's happening. First of all, in 2019, this was pre-COVID, we received $4 million in total pilot money. Now, pilot has two components to it. One is the Toll Brothers 185 carriage home pilot, and the other one is the building pilot. That's the Bell Works building pilot. So in 2019, the Toll Brothers pilot was at 70% capacity, which means that from Bell Works, we received roughly about $2.5 million. Or in other words, Bell Works was at 50% capacity. This is pre-COVID. Now, given the COVID situation, it's very likely that we're not even close to that 50% capacity. So I want people to understand that this revenue is not a fixed number. This is what they claimed at the Board of Ed meeting. This is not a fixed number, fixed revenue that we get. It's entirely dependent on the people who rent out those spaces. And even pre-COVID, we were not even close to max capacity. As I said, half capacity. So it's going to be a while before we can realize the full revenue. And therefore, we cannot account for that. And that's my concern when people start to list projects saying that we should start to bond for X, Y, and Z when we don't even have the revenues coming in. Thank you.
Yeah, I know last year the management of the building did some rate reductions. They did some rate abatements. They really tried to work with their tenants the best they could to help them survive. I don't know if you recall, but that there was probably in the March, April timeframe, The building was supporting the Bell Market that were providing lunches to our first responders on a daily basis, 7 days a week, just to try to drive some business to keep the Bell Market afloat. They've been doing a lot of creative things. Some they took out of their own pockets to keep their restaurant afloat, or their main source of food inside the building. So it's 2020 is behind us now. We need to look forward to 2021 and make sure that they're as viable as can be, and do whatever we can to make them strong. And if they're strong, the revenue that Committeeman Santana just mentioned will certainly grow and hopefully sustain for a long time to come for this town.
Mayor, could I just ask, just to add to this, I would like to know if, Sharon, what was the 2020 budgeted pilot revenue that we received, and then what was the actual? Do you have that, or does Bill have that?
It's in the budget.
I know.
Yeah. The estimated was 2 million. We collected 4.5 million.
Okay, so we budgeted for 2.5 and we received for what?
It was budgeted for 2 million, received 4.5.
4.5. So we received $2.5 million more than we had budgeted for in the height of the pandemic. So I think that's actually pretty good.
Well, a lot of that money also goes back to the prior year because we do have a settlement. So the actual billings for the year 2020 were like $1.9 million for Bell Works. Additional $1 million goes back to the year, the year before that when they had to make a settlement.
Right. No, I'm just saying it's a good thing to be to receive $2.5 million more than what we were accounting for in the height of the pandemic. So I just think it's a good sign. That's all.
Well, I think the issue is now that the billings for any given year are based upon what the revenues were in the past year. So if the revenues went down in 2020, we may actually owe them some money back. And also the billings for 2021 would be less than the $2 million that we actually billed them in 2020.
Okay.
So Committeeman, we received their budget, their audited numbers in April last year when the pandemic was already upon us. So we don't really know the impact until we get their audited numbers this year.
If I'm not mistaken,
and that's
Mayor,
why you said it's going to be in a couple weeks.
Yeah,
hopefully.
I think it was delayed last year, Mayor, because the extended tax filing deadline. So that also contributed to us getting the figures a little late in the game. Hopefully it's earlier this year. Like you said, I think the tax deadline's not been extended anywhere near as last year.
No, my understanding from the governor's office is the DCA is not extending the deadline. I think I shared that with Sharon yesterday.
For our budget.
Yeah.
So Bill, just to clarify, I want to make sure I heard you correctly. When we receive the audited numbers, you said there is the potential that we would actually have to return money to Bell Works. Is that correct?
There is a chance, yes. We have to find out exactly what the, it's based upon their revenue. The calculation is based upon their revenue. And if the revenue is actually less, we may owe them a credit for 2020. But again, we won't know that until we get their audited financial statements.
But that's a potential. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And then, Bill, one last question: do you separate the pilot money from the building and the senior homes?
The building's one account, so it's the first account within that pilot building's just for the Bell Works building, so it's very easy for us to separate it. It's not separated in the records, but it's very easy to track on our end.
Could I find that out if later?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Carrie?
The next speaker is Karen Strickland. I know there's some mouse.
Okay.
Hello, this is Karen Strickland at 26 Hayward Hills Drive. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good, Karen.
Thank you very much. I have to say, I'm really impressed by the tenor of the conversation tonight about fields. I really like the way people are asking questions and talking to one another and trying to solve a problem here. I was on the school board when we got the turf field at Rogie Field, and I thought that was a really important thing to do, to get another turf field in town. And the beauty of Rogie Field is that it can be used for lots of different sports, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for every kind of sport. And I was struck by one of the questions someone asked about Phillips Park and how we got all this turf at Phillips Park for just, it seems like just one sport. And I was wondering, is there any way that, I guess it is, I don't know if it's just baseball and softball or something, or someone told me it's just baseball. And is there any way that that turf can be used in an off-season time for other sports? And that would be my question. But I'm very impressed with everyone's level of trying to solve a problem based on data. I really like finding out how many fields we have and how many students use these fields and how many kids use these fields. I think that's really important, so I like that. But is there any way that Phillips Park turf can become multi-sport? Thank you.
Administrator, you want to take a shot at that, or you want to wait?
I can speak briefly to it. Mr. Matlack might want to add a little bit more. The Phillips Park field was designed for baseball type play, meaning there's certain sports that are a little bit rougher on the fields, and that wasn't what this park was designed for. It's not to say that no other sports could be played on it, but it's not designed for like a football program. Ben, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, generally the turf, there are different turfs for each sport specifically designed. Also, you have to look at the dimensions of the field. You know, each sport obviously has baseball fields different than soccer and lacrosse. So you may have an issue with actually fitting the field within a baseball field. But it's something the rec department could look at. You would have to do temporary striping. You know, obviously the turf fields, when they stripe those, they actually put you know, white tufts of grass inlaid into the green. So those are permanent stripes. So you'd have to look into some way of temporary striping for additional sports.
So if I could say, I'm going to actually bring that suggestion up. I appreciate it, because I think while it might not be amenable to gameplay, it might help with practice. And that's what I'm thinking, where you don't have to, you know, follow an exact regulation, where you're running drills and, you know, running practices, skills practices, right?
Yeah,
So,
Kathy, the only problem with that is, you know, and I have daughters that are in the program, you can't practice on turf and play on grass. It's just not, it's not ideal for a sport like either field hockey or lacrosse. It almost changes the entire dynamic of the play. So I just
DJ,
don't
what you
think
might
that's
be able to
something that
do
we
is
could do.
you might be able to offload Rogie some, which seems to be an issue. So
Yeah,
I think it's
that's,
worth,
you know,
it's worth looking at, right? We need to look at
it
all
is.
our options. So I think
It
that's a
is,
great
it is.
suggestion. And I mean, that's $1 million field. Let's get the
No.
maximum use out of it that we can.
I
So
think it's a
I'm going to
great,
take
yeah,
that back to Bob Ward and ask him to take a look at it and see.
I think it's
we
worth
might-
asking. Yeah, it's worth
Yeah,
checking on. I agree.
And I think there's a difference between practice and games. So I think it's a good point. Point well taken. Thank you.
I just want to point out, it's not $1 million field, it's $1 million every 7 to 10 years.
That shouldn't be, that shouldn't decide, that shouldn't make our decision, all due respect, Prakash, but I understand the cost.
Yeah, the costs have to be based on revenue. And we don't see revenue. We should be careful.
Anybody else in queue, Carrie, or?
There are no new hands up at this time, Mayor.
Okay, I thank you, Carrie, for your help tonight. With that, I will close public comment. Appreciate everyone's time tonight. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, guys.